You're listening to the Bombad Generals.
General? Oh.
Hey, welcome to the Bombad Generals. It's Seth, and I'm here with Matt. And welcome. So glad you're listening. Thank you for everyone who's been sticking with us through this podcast. I know both of us just really enjoy it. Just having a good time talking Legion. So with we're so sorry about last week regarding Todd. We just need to address this real fast that Todd was supposed to be here tonight, but we actually kicked him. We actually not kicked him off. He's suspended.
Yeah.
Yes,
We'll call it what it is.
Yes.
He was, this time it's on us. We are professionals at the Bombad Generals. Not actually, but we aspire to be. So
yes.
That means holding people accountable when they do something very unprofessional like Todd did. So when he has proven himself and done his hours of community service, then we might let him back on the podcast.
Exactly.
And I think we'll be giving no further official statement on that.
Nope.
But
it.
in similar spirit, we also want to address an error we had on the last episode. I will also blame Todd for this. He was supposed to take care of the key keyword, which was repair and restore. But obviously, we had to take it on the fly with him not being there. We had one of the points we were talking about was mixing and matching. So, bringing back minis and repairing a wound, or removing a vehicle damage token and bringing back a mini, like mixing things when you have something like R2 or Dell. So we said you couldn't do that. Under current rules, you actually can. So shout out, a couple people messaged us. I think the first person who pointed out was Mike Agnew on YouTube. So thank you, Mike, and everyone who did, because we don't want to be spreading lies, misinformation, anything like that. No lies, deception, every day more lies, not here. We want to be Saw Gerrera approved. Actually, I don't know if we do now that I say that out loud. Maybe not. So forget that part. Everything else we said was perfect and accurate, and definitely up to date with the new rules. I don't know if I've definitely heard repair played different, but the rules definitely say and or now. So at some point that changed, or I'm just dumb and got lied to as well back in the day, but is what it is. So
it is one of those keywords that has been changed periodically throughout the life of Legion. So,
and it's a weird edge case that only comes up every so often because there's only a few characters. It's almost like R2 and Dell's actually pretty great, but I've only really run him with IG. But R2 is not great these days, so that's why I haven't been using Repair 2. But this is actually a good reminder that at the table, no matter who you're playing against, people are gonna not necessarily know. They'll have mistakes on the rules. It's gonna happen. Yep. I've had people at the table tell me, "Oh, I know who you are. I'm sure you know the rules much better than I do. I trust you." And I'm like, "No, don't trust me.
Do that.
Call a judge. That's what they're here for." I would feel bad if I told someone, "Oh no, you can't do that," and it turns out they could, and they just believed me or whatnot. I've had, even at LVO, I've had things that I was very convinced, like, "Oh, this is how it works," and then the judge say, "No, Matt, you're an idiot. That's not how it works." So it's no problem at all. Call a judge. You're not trying to gotcha or be hostile. It's just
not at all.
Hey, if you're not sure and it's important, especially, just do it, because there's a lot of rules and there's a lot of iterations. So just a good learning coming out of that. But now on to the fun stuff. Yeah.
Matt.
Yes.
So one of our first segments is we always do, what have you been running? Last week we talked about Cody. Almost. But I want to know, what have you been running?
Yes. So since last week, I had my first game of the season 10 ladder eliminations, and I was playing.
And you won.
I won. I did a bit better, luckily, because I had less of a meme list. You were more kind to me when you built my Yoda Obi-Wan list. So
you were not kind to me, but continue.
I got to play. I apologize.
No, it's okay. It's fine.
But we I got to play against a Cassian Boba Rebel gun line, 11 acts. Luckily, I built a 9-act version of the list, so it wasn't too much of a disparity, especially when I remembered I can pass. I'm very used to not having enough acts to pass, or having too many acts to pass, I should say. But it was, as expected, really fun, because Yoda's really fun. It's been a while since I put him on the table, and just, Obi-Wan is kind of whatever, but when you have 2 Jedi and 2 Force pushes, you can do a lot of crazy stuff. And one really fun thing that I actually was utilizing that we talked about, I think just last week when we were talking about Cody, was the change to high velocity in Guardian, right? Because they had triple snipers and Cassian. So I didn't have Protector on Obi, so I couldn't Guardian crits. But I could Guardian hits if, they shot Yoda with a sniper rifle. Obi-Wan, I would sometimes Guardian onto Obi-Wan, spend the dodge because he's not the defender, and then Yoda doesn't have to roll for a save. So making use of that little trick that we discovered. And you can, on the Luminous turn, you can even spend Yoda's dodge on Obi-Wan, and it's
So
like
good.
Yoda dodged to the crit, or not, or
Yes.
dodged the high velocity hit, I should say.
Yeah.
So, and I think the big appeal to running double Jedi is double Force push. In this one, it has double guidance as well. Force push is an upgrade that's, I would say, pretty comfortably the best upgrade in the game
Yes.
on pretty much every Force user. If you're not taking Force push, it's just wrong.
Let's just say
And-
there's a big reason why Force users are very expensive.
Yes, and it's Force push. And there's a reason that someone like General Grievous does not see any play, and that's because he does a similar thing, but doesn't have Force push.
Correct.
It's pretty important to what they do. It's very powerful. It's not a 10-point card. It's a 10-point card that has to go on 160-point plus units.
Yes.
Right? So I think it's a complicated card. A lot of the time you see kind of players who maybe are just starting out or don't have much experience with Force users who aren't putting it on because they're saying, hey, you know what? I haven't used... I don't really see the value in Force push. What I would say is, hey, just use it. Just keep it in your list and just learn on the fly all the things it can do.
Or just try games, play 3 games, 3 to 4 games, try 2 games with it, 2 games without it, and just see the difference.
Yeah, well, I
You will
mean,
definitely
if you're
notice.
not thinking you see the difference, just start trying things. We'll give some
Yeah.
tips, I think, at the end, but we wanted to kind of transition to talk about movement in this episode and kind of some basics of movement. And then at the end, we can kind of come back to how Force push messes with those paradigms and how that becomes so powerful. Because there's very few effects in this game where you get to move your opponent's miniatures, and Force push is the main one.
Correct.
But let's start with the basics. Movement. We'll talk about measurement in our next 101 episode, but they're tied a lot, so you'll probably hear quite a bit of crossover.
Yeah.
We've got 3 movement speeds. The speed 1, speed 2, speed 3. And for me personally, the only ones that I have memorized are how long a small base trooper moves are.
Yes.
If you're running vehicles, well, whatever.
We're not going to talk about movement vehicles.
Figure it out.
on this
Figure it out
episode.
yourself. But it's essentially 4 inches, 6 inches, and 8 inches. A little bit under each of those, like just a hair under. But 4, 6, and 8. And a range 1 tool is exactly 6 inches.
6 inches,
So
yep.
a speed 1 move is a couple inches short. A speed 2 move is almost just short. And a speed 3 move is more than distance 1. So that's the very basics. Seth, anything off of that you want to add in?
Not really. Kind of like the 4. Yeah. Not. Nope.
And yeah, I think lots of times speed 2 is the standard. Is the other thing.
Correct. Yeah.
People have probably noticed speed 2 is kind of normal. If a character is only speed 1, they're kind of slow. And if they're speed 3, they're pretty fast.
Yep.
Of course, when you're talking about bigger bases like a Gav tank or an AA5, because you are moving the full length of the base, even when you have speed 1, you're still pretty darn fast with those vehicles. So that's also something to consider.
Yes.
I think mostly we'll be talking about trooper movement in this, because honestly,
Correct.
vehicle movement is funky, and I don't play a lot of vehicles, so mostly when I do, I have to kind of look up some of the rules to make sure I know what I'm doing.
Yes.
One thing that actually, I didn't put this in the notes, but we can talk about it here. Cohesion. So I think TTS is bad for this, because TTS, it's very handy, but when you move, it'll pop up a little speed 1 circle around your unit leader.
A 4-inch ring, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like basically saying, hey, you can cohere in this circle, but you can't actually all the time.
Correct.
Right? Why is that?
Because
Why
you
is
need
that?
to make it needs to be a legal speed 1 move, and sometimes whenever you're around terrain or something, you have to like notch the base, or like turn the base. I don't know what the exact phrasing is called, but kind of angle the
Bend the
base.
tool.
Bend the tool. Yes, bend the tool to where like it does not become a full 4-inch move, in order to make that movement for cohesion.
So you cannot cohere speed 1 through a wall or something like that.
Correct.
That most people have a good grasp on that. The thing that I keep catching myself on, because I've been playing a lot of shore mortars recently, is that now you cannot move through emplacement troopers, which was not the case before. So it's a bit of a learning curve, which at least under my understanding, that means I can't cohere through an emplacement trooper. So I'm used to putting, maybe I have a shore unit in front and I cohere one guy through the mortar. Nowadays, you can't do that. So just think about that when you're placing your mortars or your Mark IIs, anything like that that's impassable. If you need to cohere through it or even just move through it, you can't. So that's something important to keep in mind. That is a newer change that if you haven't played emplacements really much since the CRB, you might not have thought of.
Yes.
I think another big thing is when it comes to movement is speed X moves. When something says perform a speed 1 move, perform a speed 2 move, there's a lot of confusion around what triggers around that. Because does charge trigger? Does relentless? Do I get tactile? Agile? Can I climb? Can I do this? Do I ignore difficult terrain? Seth, kind of talk us through in what ways is a speed X move different than just a move action with a unit?
Yeah, so there's specific things that trigger off a move action, like your relentless triggers off a move action. So the unit is physically taking the action to lay down the movement template and move the model. Speed X moves kind of like force push, or like Padme's 2-pip or Leia's 2-pip. Where they can perform a free speed X move. Those do not trigger relentless. So you're moving the mini, but you don't get the effects of charge, relentless, tactical, agile off of those. So they're a little bit different, but the thing how they're both the same is they still both trigger like a standby, because a move is still happening, even though it's not a move action. So that's the big thing to think about. Even though it's not an action, the Speed X move, it is still a move. And since standby is if an enemy unit performs a move, you then can then perform an action.
That is a really good point. Yeah, because that's why it says there are ways in this game to get moves and attacks that are not actions, which is why something like Standby says whenever a unit performs an action or moves or attacks, which is why, well, yeah, we can talk about it now. Force push.
Force push.
If someone dives your lines, you can stand by with your entire army and force push them, and that is an enemy unit that has moved. Even though it's a speed 1 move, they can all trigger, anyone who's in range can trigger their standbys, right? So that's something to be aware of when you're playing Jedi. People can do standby traps. I used to do this a lot when CAD came out. People would aggressively place the CAD token. I would stand by with my whole army because you could pretty often figure out which token the CAD token is. Stand by with the whole army, move my Jedi up. Hey, look, it's CAD. He revealed himself because I got to range 1. Force push, shoot him with my whole army, and he's dead turn 1.
He's dead. Yep.
Right? So that is something to be aware of with how those are interacting. I think when we talk about Speed X moves, one of the great example to talk through is Scout. So if a unit has Scout 2, can I go into difficult terrain?
Yeah, you can move through. You ignore difficult terrain whenever you scout. Now, let's say you scout into difficult terrain. Your first action, like during the activation phase, during turn 1, you do have to like lower your movement to get out of difficult terrain.
If you start moving.
Yes.
Yeah. If you choose to move and you're in difficult, that's actually difficult to a whole. We can talk about difficult terrain later because there's some interesting things there. But I think a lot of people shorthand now. So what can you not do on a speed X move?
So you
on
can't
Scout
like
2.
So on Scout 2, you can't like climb, so it still has to be like a normal move. You can't use your jump because like some like arcs, you can add jetpacks. You can't do jump.
Yeah, jump requires a move action. It's when you're doing a move action, you can jump.
You can't do like your relentless, tactical, agile on any of those. It's just you're just simply moving the unit forward, but you don't get any special effects from it.
Yes, and I think a lot of people shorthand when they think, hey, I don't care about difficult terrain to, hey, I don't care about terrain. And they think that, I can go up it's just a distance, right? Yeah. I can go up a level 2, height 2 building. That's not the case. You ignore difficult terrain because if it says you have Scout 2, you use the Speed 2 move.
Correct.
Right? That's why you don't care, because it's telling you what tool to use.
Yeah.
But climbing is something you do instead of a move action. You're not doing any of that. You don't get to do a climb.
It's pretty much expanding your deployment zone that extra 4 or 6 inches.
But
of course, it still has to deploy and make a legal speed move, just for rules and everything.
Yeah, and maybe this is helpful for people to think about it, right? If you could charge off of or use Relentless off of a speed 1 move, then you could, when you force push someone, they would get to attack, which is weird.
It is
so
weird. It would be a big nerf to force push.
When you're looking at Leia and thinking, if I do a speed 1 move, I can attack. No, it's not going to work like that.
The only time you can move outside of your action and like perform is guidance or pull the strings to get the special thing outside of your own activation.
I think those might be one of the only 2 free, outside of activation move actions in the game right now. But
I think
maybe
so.
Maybe there's more. But yes, those ones, they say move action, sweet, you get to trigger all your stuff. So that's that. While we're on the topic of Scout, he's not a very popular unit right now, but Rex. Ooh. I think there's a lot of players who, honestly, it's just not reading the keyword. If you read scouting party, it says, hey, if you've already scouted, you can't scout again.
Correct.
Be aware of that. You can't scout 1 and then scout 2 with Rex. Or you can't take an arc, scout 2, and then scouting party another 2. Doesn't work like that.
Nope.
Important to note, because Wicket has scouting party. We're going to see that keyword probably a lot more than we have for the last however long, year and a half since Rex got toasted.
Since post 2021 update.
Yes. So that's something to be aware of there. We've already talked about it a bit, but I think... do you want to talk about the mobility keywords, or do you want to talk about difficult terrain first?
Let's touch on difficult terrain, because we're kind of already on that subject.
Yeah, what do you want to talk about difficult terrain?
So there's some tricks that I think I've used in the past for difficult terrain. One that includes force push. Again, force push, such a powerful keyword. But taking a unit that is speed 2 or more and putting them in difficult terrain is very effective. One, because they have to then make a speed 1 move to get out of there. Again, it's still kind of effective for speed 3, but not as effective. But it's more those speed 2 trooper units. In difficult terrain, and also using difficult terrain for your advantage, whether objective play, for key positions and everything. I think it's some cool tricks that I've used in the past.
Think on a very basic level, when we're talking difficult terrain, if the unit leader or any miniature starts their turn in difficult terrain, even if it's one guy out of 5, you have to slow down to a minimum of 1, but you have to slow down. And then conversely, if you are ending your turn in difficult terrain, then you have to slow down. You can't do a full speed move, whatever that is for you. If you're a rebel trooper unit, your speed is 2. If you do a full speed 2 move, you cannot then cohere into difficult terrain. If you want to cohere into that terrain, you have to slow down on the move and then cohere.
Yep.
So that's something, but you can cohere through difficult terrain still.
Correct.
Like a barricade.
Yep.
This is classic a barricade move, right? Usually you want to put your unit leader in front or to the side of the barricade so they can move ahead at full speed, and then cohere your unit behind the barricade, which is going through the barricade, but it's not like area terrain or anything like that.
Correct.
It's fine. Usually if you're cohering into difficult, often that means it's like difficult area terrain. For the most part.
You can still do a trick
situations.
like cohering through like a difficult area terrain as long as like the whole base of the miniature is not in the area terrain. Then it would still be a not difficult terrain move.
So there are tricks there. That's why that works. But yeah, something to be aware of, because if you're trying to jump on a key position, right, and it's a difficult key position, you want to make sure, hey, I can get there with even a slower move to the middle of that KP. Something like that. So, now that we've talked about difficult terrain, we can talk about some of the keywords that ignore the difficult terrain.
Yeah.
The list I've got, climb isn't really a keyword, it's an action, but that's how we'll get there. Climbing, we've got jump, we've got unhindered, expert climber, scale. Those are the main ones, I'd say. Talk us through those. Do we want to do rankings? What's the most powerful?
Jump is the most powerful.
Yeah.
As of this moment. So jump, what it means is just you can ignore up to jump X, the X height while moving. That includes difficult terrain as well. So for instance,
impassable terrain.
And impassable, yes. Now you still cannot like land in impassable terrain, but you can still jump through impassable terrain.
Like a mortar.
Like a mortar.
If you need to.
Yes. So like a lot of the Jedis have it. Jump 1. Just your speed 1 move, jumping over everything. The only caveat of using that, you can only use it 1 time during your activation, because it has that special action symbol, and since some people get confused about it, because you are making a move action, but you're still triggering that jump action in order to ignore that terrain. But the second action can be a move action. You just cannot do that jump action, because the only action you can do twice is a standard move.
Moves. You can do non-standard moves like pivots. It's technically the jump is a card action, and card actions you're limited to 1. So if you are a Jedi and you need to jump off a building, you then can't jump over a mortar on your next move because you've already used jump. So that's important to kind of plan out your movements. Unless you're Yoda on his 1 pip, then you can
do whatever the heck you want.
Do whatever the heck you want.
Yeah, who cares?
It's very niche. In the CRB, jump changed so that if you're on height 2 terrain, it used to be no matter what your jump value was, you could always go down as far as you needed to. Now you can only go up or down equal to your jump value. So if you have jump 1 and you're on height 2, you can't jump all the way to the surface of the battlefield.
Correct.
You have to go down to... go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was saying that's always measured from the bottom of your base, not any part of your silhouette.
Yeah. Doesn't come up a bunch, but if it ever does, you're going to feel real bad if you strand your Jedi somewhere weird.
Yeah.
Because especially now, you cannot climb height 2 normally. Before, we had different rules for clambering and such, where you could. Now, climbing is where you decrease your speed, or it's always speed 1, and you can go up height 1, right? And if you want to make it height 2, you need expert climber or scale, and that's it, right
That's
now.
it. That's it. Well, unless jump 2.
Unless you have jump 2. Yeah.
Yes.
But if you're just a normal unit trying to climb around, you cannot go up height 2 terrain. You'd have to again go up height 1 and then maybe height 1 again. Again, doesn't come up a ton, but it is important. I think even before the CRB changes, I was trying to get a bit more height 2 terrain on my tables because I felt, at least for me, that was a bit of a gap. I didn't really have much for height 2 terrain on some of them. It's good. It stops things like speeders from being able to ignore everything.
Yep.
Because, with Speeder X, they can ignore terrain up to height X. So, speeder bikes, barks, all that, just ignore height 1 terrain for the most part. So having height 2 stuff is good for that. But also, it's nice to have some things that not everybody can climb onto. Mm-hmm. So if you're table building, looking at having some really good, interesting, dynamic tables, you definitely want to have stuff that people can climb. You don't want to make it, a purely grounded game.
Yeah.
But you want to also have it so that there are some spots where not everyone can go. And that gives a little bonus to something like Mandos if people have that. Like if people paid for the jump 2 keyword, then hey, or expert climber or scale, maybe they get like a little special area that they can go to.
Then you just run Boba and you can just do whatever you want.
So I'd say, I guess if we're ranking it after jump, for that reason, I would put scale because it's kind of a combination of the other 2 keywords. It's expert climber and it's unhindered. So unhindered is you ignore difficult terrain.
Yep, that's it.
Pretty nice.
Yep.
Characters like Han, I really like that on. Anyone else really who's really big into that unhindered? I guess like maybe Black Suns you could put it on.
I know, like I've seen it on IRG. Like they like it.
Yeah, IRG like it. Yep, because if you've got units who need to get close, then you want to make sure. Yeah, you want to make sure that you can actually really go full speed. You don't want to get bogged down by difficult terrain or barricades.
Yeah.
Right? So those kind of guys, if you've got like a gun line and you've got like pikes, they don't really need unhindered. They're sitting back at range anyways, right? It's probably save the 2 points for environmental gear and just be cool with it.
Yeah, it's only units that really matter. Like there's a lot of movement happening, which I think there's like magnets already have unhindered, so
those guys. And so do freaking the Blizzard Storms, HRUs.
Yeah, I could see an argument to put it. Oh no, I could see an argument to put it on Black Suns, like if you're just really trying to close that gap. The gap. And then
it competes. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go for it.
I think for something like a Black Sun skew, it kind of competes with recon intel because getting that extra speed 1 at the start of the game, that's 4 inches that you're getting closer to your enemy. Versus every slow move you make is, again, if you're going from speed 2 down to speed 1, that's about 2 inches you're saving or losing. Yep. So I think recon intel is probably still the way I'd go on something like Black Suns or like a range 2 skew, because what are the chances that I'm going to have 3 difficult moves in my path?
It's true.
Probably not that much. So if I can get 4 inches guaranteed, if I'm at two difficult moves in there, hey, I still broke even. If I'm at 1, I'm ahead of the game by taking recon intel. Versus Han, or even Cassian to an extent, like those guys, they don't necessarily need that turn 1 move as much. Han's not all about beelining it to the enemy as fast as possible. He's probably going to just hide somewhere turn 1 anyways. So he doesn't necessarily need those 4 inches.
Yeah.
But
and then you have
that kind of... Oh, go ahead.
No, go for it.
I was just thinking we can kind of transition to like... Scout is a great example of how you can get some extra movement in, but there's some other ones, like guidance and such. I think just examples of, hey, why would you want to utilize some of this extra movement? So for me, when we're talking about that, like recon intel, there's a couple really good examples that I've got tactically from some lists that I've run recently, why I want that. So we'll talk more in the measurement 101 about the ranges on the battlefield, but essentially you start range 4 apart, just beyond range 4, because the whole table it's 3 feet wide, so that's 6 inches, or sorry, range 6, and then if you've got something like battle lines, a lot of deployments have a section that's range 1 up across from each other, so that leaves range 4 in between. On something like my RPS squad, I don't know if you do this, but on my RPS squad, if I've got the points these days, I'm putting recon intel in there.
Oh yeah.
So that I don't have to wait for their dark troopers to activate before I can shoot them or fire support them. I can get a fire support off turn 1 before you've activated your dark troopers if my RPS has recon intel, because I don't want to get too close, but I can get from beyond 4 into 4, which is all you need. So I think that's a really good use of it. Are you putting it on your RPS squads for similar reasons?
If I have the points, it depends. I know I put it back on my RPS squad when I was running Rex, but then again, like Rex also has scouting parties, so you could scout them scouting party out. Not
that's
seeing
what,
it. What go?
That's why that's another great example just to cut in there. Rex, you always want recon intel on Rex.
Oh yeah,
because it's a multiplicative effect, right? If he doesn't have it, he scouts 1, 2 buddies scout 1. If he has scout 2 because of recon intel, 2 buddies get to scout 2.
It's pretty good.
So you're getting a lot for 2 points, and he has 2 gear slots. He's probably not using. He doesn't have like 3 things he wants to put in gear. Gear is kind of a whatever upgrade.
Yeah.
So he's a great candidate for him. He's just garbage, but he loves recon intel.
Yeah, he does. I know Wookiees do. Like I liked it in Wookiees.
Yeah.
Especially post CRB changes. But still, like even now CRB changes, I'd still put recon on them just to get, again, like close that gap to just get those Wookiees in. Because now more than ever, Wookiees need that extra move to get into combat with like their enemy.
And because they natively have unhindered, they're going to ignore that difficult terrain anyways. So you're not sacrificing anything.
Yep.
I think the one other example I have is Boba Fett. So in my worlds list, when I was running Rule with Respect, that's a card that usually I was playing at turn 1, and the ability only has effect when Boba Fett has a face-up order token. So I want him to be face-up for as long as possible. But also, I want to kind of get him moving towards the enemy so that if the rest of my army is in range 1 of him, they're also moving towards the enemy. If I put him in the back and I want to use his ability, that kind of handicaps me on where I put my forces. So partly I would put recon on him because, let's be honest, sometimes in your deployment zone there's not a place you can hide. There's not a place you can stay out of LOS. So if you've got someone like a Jedi, because lots of Jedi don't have gear slots, then maybe you activate them early, move, hide, and you're good. On Rule with Respect specifically, I don't want to do that because then I don't get the ability. So take recon intel, that gives me a big area that maybe I can scout somewhere hidden and then move my army up behind. And then, hey, now Boba's closer to the enemy. The chances that he can shoot with maybe 6 dice because he gets to range 2, they go way up. So I think Boba's a really great candidate for something like recon intel for that reason.
Yeah.
If I'm not running Rule with Respect, sometimes people like it because they can close range to get the rocket off more easily on turn 1. I don't like that. That's not really why I'm putting it on there, but that sort of stuff. I think if Commander Luke was any good, recon intel's a fine upgrade on him because similarly, hey, now I can kind of hide him off the bat. So if you've got a unit where, hey, I really don't want this unit to be in a vulnerable position turn 1, giving them a little bit of extra movement helps a lot with that.
Yep.
One last thing, because I just thought of this while we're on, this has turned into the Scout podcast, Scouting 101, but hostage exchange.
Ooh,
why does my scout, I gave this core recon intel, why doesn't that work on hostage exchange?
Because they didn't deploy, they were placed. via the objective, where Scout says after you deploy, you may make a speed 1 move, where unlike hostage exchange, you're more placed.
Yeah. And
Now, but like Rex's scouting party breaks that, because technically, so like after he deploys, he can move someone after they deploy, or he can just move a unit that has not scouted. And since they have not scouted, they can then move to make that free speed 2 move if you have recon intel. So Rex on scouting party is really good to get that free speed 2 move for your hostage if you get within range 2 of him. Really good on advanced positions as well.
Yeah.
Speed 3.
Yeah. Yep. It's a numbered keyword, so it stacks. So if you've got someone with Scout 1 on advanced positions, they're getting Scout 2. If they've gotten Scout 2, they're getting Scout 3. That's awesome. I forget what I was on a path there. I don't know. But hey, that's okay. We talked a lot about Scout. There's a lot of really good utility.
Now, just remember, on Scout, you cannot end your Scout move on base contact with a objective token.
Yes.
That is a big thing that they changed.
That's a great transition. Unfortunately, I also remembered what I was going to say before, which was same deal with rapid reinforcements. When you come in with rapid reinforcements, you are placed. You do not get to scout because you're not deployed. You are placed on the battlefield. I guess same with CAD. I don't know the exact wording, if it's a place or a swap, but he's not deployed, so he couldn't like scout off of his token being revealed. But transition, boom, 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 boom. Okay.
Boom, 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 boom.
Boom, 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 boom. We had a masterful transition to talking about. Now I forgot that already. My goodness, my brain's everywhere tonight. My apologies.
It's okay. Is it force push? Still recircling back to force push?
No, you said right before we were talking. Right before
we talk about extra moves outside of the unit's activation.
Because you cannot base a so if you've got Scout 3, you cannot base like a VAP or something. So to continue on, hey, why is Scout good? It changes the math on that because range 1 is larger than a speed 2 move, you can't, and pretty much all objectives like VAPs, recover, all those ones, even supply boxes, the condition, they are all range 1 at least from your deployment zone. You can't move and tap them with a speed 2 unit right away. Correct. Unless you have a way to scout forward. Or you have speed 3. So that's where speed 3 units can really get some versatility. You know, if you've got a Mandalorian who's not really doing much that turn, maybe, you know, Sabine is sitting back, or Boba, they can just move up and tap that VAP or recover that box right away, which is very handy. So that's a good thing. While we're on the topic of speed 3, burst of speed, we can talk about this really with force push. So when we're talking about these upgrades, they're really good because they change the math on engagement.
Correct.
Right? If you've just got a Jedi with charge and no force push, if I'm trying to get to your army safely, which means in engagement with a trooper unit, I have to be range 2, a little bit closer than range 2. At the very least, because 2 speed 2 moves for the most part, for most Jedi. Or even closer if you're a Commander Vader, very sad. If I've got force push, now that engagement range went from about 12 inches to about 16 inches. If I have burst of speed, now I'm doing an 8-inch move, so my 2 moves are 16, and force push is another 4. Now we're at 20 inches. We've hit that magical 18-inch mark, which is range 3. A lot of gun lines, if you talk about our Gunline 101 episode, a lot of gun lines operate at that range 3. So once you've breached that threshold, now I can engage you if you shoot at me. For the most part. If you end your turn, if you move up and shoot me, I will burst of speed into you, force push, and now I'm stuck. Now, don't always do that. Maybe they have a Jedi. Right? And they'll force push you and kill you, and you'll be really sad. But the threat is there. It really changes the math quite a bit.
Yes.
That's one really good thing of Burst of Speed. And again, just like having Speed 3 is fantastic.
Fansmastic. So it's really good for like Maul, because like for like any other Jedi or Sith, like with Charge of Relentless, when they do that double move, they're still within a few inches away. They can't attack, but Maul, he can move, force push them in, and then attack. So Maul's really good at that, especially with the Burst of Speed.
I was a big fan of Maul with Burst of Speed. That was in my LSO list back in the day.
Yeah,
it's a little tougher to swallow now that it's
now.
10 points and Choke is 5.
Yep.
It got unfairly, well, maybe fairly, but and Choke just got unfairly not wrecked in the last update. But
yes,
Burst of Speed's still a really good card. Pretty much every 3-4 slot user I'm taking it on.
Yes.
And it's, if you don't have access to Force Choke, as in you're a light side Force user, it's very strong contender for that second Force slot.
Correct.
And similarly, Din's Jetpack, right?
Yeah.
I'm paying 15 points for that every time if I'm running Din, because the difference between Speed 2 and Speed 3 on a character that's trying to be mobile, trying to engage, which he is, he likes being in melee, being in close range. I'm paying that cost.
Yeah. The more of the cost is less of the jump and more of the Speed 3.
Jump is good too.
I hope they add that to Ark's jetpacks. That'd be nice.
That'd be really nice.
I don't know though. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jetpacks, unless you're Arcs or Old Man Boba, they don't increase They do increase
Correct.
your speed unless you're those two characters.
Correct. Correct. So let's real quick touch on climbing real fast.
Okay, and
we
then we
haven't
can
really
get to the big force push.
And then we'll get to the big force push. So climbing, it's an action. It is a movement action to where you can climb up a height of height 1 or less, and just to make a speed 1 move. It's really, this climbing has really brought a whole whopping lot of units that were good to like really good level, like from let's A tier to like S tier. I think of like Darth Vader, like he was already like A plus C S minus tier. Now he's like S plus with this climbing rules, because of like, we've talked about it before, like the move up, relentless, move down, climb down. Also with snow troopers, like this is I saw this a lot in snow troopers when playing Blizzard. It's just climb up to height 1. They're just hanging out behind a line of sight blocker and climb up height 1, shoot, climb back down with their steady. It's a really good keyword. Movement wise, it helps with your force users with their jump, because like we mentioned earlier, you can only jump once, so you can like jump onto a height 1 building and then like do whatever you need to do, and then like climb down, or like jump up and then climb down, or like climb up and then jump, however way you want to do that.
There's a lot of ways to do it for sure.
Yeah, but climbing does help the variance in height whenever you see different tables.
It's a change I've liked. It makes things a lot more dynamic, vertically speaking. We'll see if something like Wookiees get any attention that makes them more mobile, because things with scale lost a bit of mobility. But yeah, anything with, there was an old trick with CAD under the old rules where you would like have ascension cable, so you'd use his jump to get up and then trigger steady and then trigger the free move down with ascension cables and scale. Now everyone can do that. If you've got relentless or you've got steady, you can just jump on top of a building, shoot, jump back down. If Snows had a real heavy weapon, they'd be very scary.
It's true. It's true.
So if anything comes out with relentless, my first thought is like, what kind of weird peekaboo shenanigans can I do? You could always peekaboo around the corner, walk around a building, walk back. Now you can do it otherwise.
Which helps a lot with like this new cover rules, because usually a higher elevation helps you get people out of cover.
Harder than before, but now, since it's so hard to get people out of cover, getting above them is one of the not only ways, but definitely one of the better ways.
It's one of the most effective ways.
Yeah.
I say that like as in like it's very hard to get people out of cover. So most effective is like
most effective is keywords. Blast and sharpshooter too. Yeah.
Yes.
coincidentally, we saw a lot of blast and sharpshooter at Worlds. Who would have thought?
Not
Interesting.
me.
But let's talk about the big thing, force push. Just watch. We're gonna talk more about 2-point whatever recon intel than we're gonna talk about the GOAT card, which is force push.
The GOAT
Seth,
card.
you're a lover of all things force push. Do you want to lead us off? Why do you love force push?
So I love force push because who doesn't love force push? Because I don't know, I'm a simp for
Luke
Jedis.
Cook, I don't know if I've ever seen that guy run force push, but he's won 2 world championships. So
It's true. Without
good
it.
on him. Yeah.
Without force push. So good on him. So again, we mentioned before, I think force push is one of the biggest reasons why the Jedi and force users are so expensive. One, because force powers are really good, and out of all the force powers, force push is the best for force power. One of the key things of why it's so powerful is on force push is it's a free action, so it doesn't take up any of your main 2 actions, so that's super helpful. And then you perform a speed 1 move, so it's not a perform a speed 1 move action of an opponent, but it is even while it's engaged. So if I'm using a force user and I dive in, like we said before, using that burst of speed, getting into 20 inches of getting engaged so that you're safe, so you can't be shot. So what you do then is your next turn, you force push that unit out, so it's making a move, but it can do it while it's engaged. So now you're moving it out of engagement. So that frees you up to then do whatever you would like. So you can then move and do another charge into a different unit. The only caveat is you can only use force push once a turn.
Yeah. It's incredibly important to dictate your engagement as a melee centerpiece. Now, something like Wookiees, the reason they can get by without it is because there's 3 of them, and that's their whole deal, and they're 100 points each. A Jedi is one, again, probably with upgrades, we're talking 180 to 220.
Yep.
And they can't afford to have you just be like, oh, I have a unit with 2 guys left. I'll walk them into you, sacrifice them to keep you where you're at, right?
Yeah.
Force push keeps that from happening. Now, if your opponent ties you down with 2 units, suddenly force push, you can only get rid of 1 of them, right? So, but you're at least making them bring more resources to bear against you to slow you down. Or if you're Op Luke with disengage and force push, now they have to bring 3 units to engage you with before you are stuck. Because at 2, he pushes 1 away. Now he's only engaged with 1. He can use disengage, get out of there. So, critical. Not even just to kill things, to be able to say, hey, I want to go kill that guy, so I'm going to get you out of the way, but also just to get where you need to be, to threaten objectives, to protect yourself, because that's the other thing. Jedi want to be in very specific spots, usually in melee. We'll talk more about, melee is always going to go up. I think it's a big part of the game. Force push, we've talked about it already. Really, a lot of the time, it's force pull. You're moving them into you. And again, they've got to be within 4 inches of you because you are moving the unit leader in. You can't cohere into a melee. So you need their unit leader within 4 inches of you. If you don't have force push, you have to, again, end already in contact with them.
Correct.
A lot of the time, what a Jedi could do is they can move, chop 1 guy up, kill them, force push an activated unit into them. And that's what I was doing a lot of this weekend, right? When you have 2 force pushes, it's just that on steroids. It's like, hey, I withdraw, my other force user is going to go and force push you back into them. Or I'm going to move, chop someone up, and then next turn my force user is going to go and force push a different guy. Or guidance takes it up to 11 because now I'll guidance Obi-Wan to go attack someone else. Right? Like guidance and pull the strings. A huge part of them. Sure, you can get extra attacks, with pull the strings or with relentless on Yoda's 2-pip, right? With guidance, but a lot of their value is in the extra movements. There's all kind of shenanigans.
Yeah.
I think it was our one of our early episodes, I think we talked about Yoda probably back in November, December. If you want a really deep dive, it was our key keyword. But getting an extra speed 2 move, we won't rehash it, but it does a lot of stuff that it breaks your brain. You don't think about it.
Yep.
And then I think probably the most powerful use of Force Push is it's a guaranteed effect that relocates an enemy, which is incredibly important when you talk about most objectives in the game.
Yep.
We've talked about it before. It'll always come up. The best competitive strategies are the ones that are not going to rely on dice for the most part.
Correct.
Right? Because I can know that this is going to happen. If I have a Force user with an untapped Force Push, as long as they don't die, I can use that Force Push. Which means if I'm doing math on an intercept point, I know that, hey, when my Force user goes, I will Force Push an activated unit off and they will not be able to score. Or I will Force Push off one of their backfield units before they activate, and then they'll be so far away that they can't get to scoring position. Right? It's not like, oh, I have to roll 5 hits and they have to fail enough saves that I kill 2 guys. This is going to happen.
Yeah.
If I want it to happen.
Yeah.
And go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say, as a reminder, Force Push, it's not like, even though it's a speed X move, you cannot like climb, so you can't go over height 1 or under height 1 or like, up or down.
You can't push people off buildings. You can't push them off the battlefield. It goes back to our whole speed X move discussion. But it also means if you Force Push a Tauntaun, they don't get a dodge from Agile. They used to, but that's been changed for unrelated reasons that have to do with arcs gaining a lot of aims on scouting moves.
It was not a nerf. It was,
back in the day. Yeah.
Oh, it's not like independents are getting. Anyway.
Yeah, we can't have we can't have all these tokens before the turn starts, before the game even starts. Also,
each turn.
Meet independent. What if you got that every turn? Yes.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
What if you had? Okay, never mind. That's.
What if you had what?
Oh, like independent, like move. Like you did it independent, and it's like, oh, make a free speed 1 move. That's so OP, but that'd be
moves good.
Spicy.
Moves are very good in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just anything, unless it's the keyword expert climber. Unless it's the keyword expert climber, things movement related are usually pretty good.
Yes. Yes. Correct.
Is there anything we haven't touched on when it comes to movement other than vehicles? Whatever. When we're talking about trooper movement.
No, just a quick reminder on Force Push is that like if a unit has a standby, and so let's say if like I had this come up in the game earlier where someone's Darth Vader moved and then took it moved and took standby. I still had my Force user left to go, and I was within range 1 of that unit. That Force user, I can move that unit with a standby, and that person would lose. Darth Vader would then lose his standby because he made a move, and that standby wouldn't trigger because I did Force Push first. So just a quick reminder that don't take a standby if you're within range 1 of a Force user that has activated with Force Push up.
Yes. Or if you do know that is a possibility, right? But yeah, you don't want to dive a Jedi and standby, and then if they're just going to Force Push you and you're not going to have the standby anymore.
Correct.
That's basically the only way you can knock a standby off of Dark Troopers as well.
Yes. Now, quick reminder that Force powers, you do not need line of sight. So you can
unless
do a Force
they say
push.
they do, and I
unless
don't
they
think
say.
any really do.
I don't think so, because it's a Force. They can feel their way through the line of sight blocker.
Mm-hmm.
So you can move people out of line of sight.
Yeah. One thing you can do is if they're behind a wall that you're behind and you're trying to hide, you Force push them and maybe cohere them forward and then use a move, go into melee with them.
The unit you cohered. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another thing. When you Force push someone, you get to do the coherence.
Yep.
If that's a word, cohesion. I think cohesion. Yeah.
Yes.
Coherence is what I've not been today. So you get to do the cohesion, which means, hey, at the very least, like sometimes with Op Luke, because he has disengage, I get to the end of his activation and I'm kind of like, I don't really need to use Force Push, but I've got Master of the Force, so there's no reason not to use it. Hey, I'll Force Push this unit, cohere them forwards. Now they're at range of a lot more stuff in my army, right? Maybe they were trying to hang out at range 4. I Force Push them, and now they're at range 3. Because you can move a full range band. If they've cohered, usually people cohere towards themselves, not towards the enemy. So if you move the unit leader and then cohere a guy forward towards your army, then that's 4 inches of the move plus 4 inches on cohesion. So you've moved them 8 inches closer to you.
Yep.
So that could move them from range 5 into range 3.
It's super helpful if that unit's like carrying an objective token, because then you can like move that objective token away from the army more. So like, let's say hostage exchange, you can then like move, force push them, cohere away, get into melee with that unit, and then they have to teleport the unit leader into melee with you, and then hence that objective token also comes with you. So that's like an extra, that's like more than 8 inches of the objective token being moved.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I'll say it'll be my final tip. When it comes to pre-measuring with the movement tools, you're allowed 1 movement tool on the table at a time.
Yes.
So you can't like put a movement tool down, put a second movement tool down to like figure out where you're gonna be. But if you've got a speed 1 unit like Dark Troopers or Yoda or whoever, 2 speed 1 moves. Well, we said, hey, it's 4 inches. 4 inches, 4 inches, 8 inches. That's a speed 3 move. So it's 1 speed 3 move is close, not exact, but very close to 2 speed 4 moves. So if I want to say, hey, if I double move Yoda, what would that look like? I can pull out the speed 3 tool, and then I just have to imagine his base at the end of it. And that's 2 speed 4 moves. Of course, you can bend the tools differently, but if you're looking at straight line speed, that'll do it for you. Same with Dark Troopers. If I'm like, hey, where will my 2 activations get me down the battlefield? Boom, measure it. Yeah. If we're talking about measuring, and you've got a pile drive and objective at the end of the game, hey, I've got speed 2 units. Make sure that I'm within range 2 going into turn 6, because if I'm further than range 2, it's impossible for me to get there with 2 speed 2 moves.
Correct.
Right? Or maybe I want to be in range 1 so that even if I get suppressed, I can make a single move and get to that objective. Right? So always be measuring, and know if you take anything away, remember 4, 6, and 8 for the small base troopers. A little under 4 inches for speed 1, a little under 6 inches for speed 2, a little under 8 for speed 3. And if you want to know more, figure that out yourself. That's homework.
Or drop a comment or email us on the podcast. Email us.
I think there's a lot of resources out there. I think people have made up like charts of like how much each thing moves depending on base size, but if I'm running tawns, I'll remind myself how much tawns can move relative to a normal thing.
I remembered prepping for Worlds, I did a lot of experimenting with barks, because the barks base are a little bit different than all the other speeders bases.
That's true. They're nice and big. So
they are nice and big.
Yeah.
I think that
Remember,
wraps up.
Size doesn't matter. It's how you use.
It's how you move it. It's how you move.
Yeah, it's how you move it. Yeah.
It's how you move it.
Yeah.
I think
that's the big takeaway.
That's Movement 101 right there. I think that wraps up our discussion of Movement 101. Stay tuned for other episodes of 101. For instance, we mentioned before, we will have a Measurement 101 coming up here soon. And stay tuned for our next week episode. I totally forgot what we're talking about, but there will be an episode.
There will be an episode.
Yes. And if you can, just drop in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, or email us on the podcast at bombadgenerals at gmail.com. And we'd just love to hear like your stories of the games you're playing, or like how like our podcast has either helped you or made you a worse player.
Or if you have something that you want us to talk about. Honestly, I think one of my locals was the inspiration for a few of these 101s, just saying, hey, like, can you talk a bit more about movement? Yep. So we're happy to do that. And hopefully we get most things right.
Yes.
If we don't, let us know.
I'll start double checking all of Matt's rules.
Todd's
No,
rules.
no, I'm sorry, Todd. It was Todd's. Yes. Well, thanks so much for listening or watching the Bombad Generals. We hope you have a great week.
Oh, and stay Gungan. Boom.
I've just been doing it a lot.
Gonna do it.
Well, I was.
No,
I
that's
had stay Gungan. Well, I was getting like
Stay
you've been
Gungan.
doing it. Yeah.
Stay
This has been the Bombad Generals.
Listening to Bombad Generals is not scientifically proven to make you a better Legion player. Side effects may include bad dice rolls, missed triggers, aim losses, bankruptcy, divorce, vomiting, and sudden death. Ask your doctor if Bombad Generals is right for you.